Hello, welcome to this new episode of the podcast. We have David Galaviz. David is the curator of Dallas Hub of Global Shapers Community. He is an ex-entrepreneur and works as an impact investment consultant and social wealth partners. And since we don't have much people from this spectrum, I want you to narrate your own story, David, because you do
Yeah,
have an amazing story to tell us.
yeah. Thank you very much, man. It was very great meeting you, Geneva, and following up. But yeah, I'll share a little bit about my background. So for me, I've always tried to pursue like where innovation really just kind of crashes with demand, right? Because the way I see it, to me, that's exciting. It's like, what are we creating that's new? But at the same time, like, let's not just create things just to create. Like, let's create something that is either very useful or something that people want. So I went in with this approach. That's why I have a background in economics when I went to university, because I wanted to understand this, and I studied a lot of different versions. I did a lot of research too, and I started with trying to understand like what innovations can we implement in corporate America, starting with the energy sector. So I worked deeply for about 2 years in operations when I found that what, this probably isn't the organization for me. It definitely has a lot of sway and influence and a lot of important things in the market. But in terms of how quickly we could turn or pivot or how quickly we could apply that innovation, I found it a little bit lackluster on an individual, like application, right? I feel like I couldn't do much myself. So I really wanted to focus a little bit more on the innovation aspect and see like, was I missing something? So I went back to the university and became a researcher of economics in business. At the time, we were studying a lot about like blockchain, the future of work, smart cities, foods, and growing economies. So, what created economies in certain communities in certain countries, what kind of allowed them to either stagnate, what were the barriers, and what kind of ultimately destroyed them. So, it was pretty interesting. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of interviews actually with a lot of founders, a lot of managing directors of like banks who would either make investments or loans and stuff to kind of understand what was the motivation and what did each stakeholder have at stake to try to push this and try to get a really good positive outcome. During that, I interviewed a lot of venture capitalists and a lot of founders for startups, and eventually, just through kind of a lot of the work that I did, one of the founders was like, "You should join my team." So I did, because I was just like, let's just keep chasing this innovation and demand aspect of it. So I did that. I worked for a startup. I was one of the first 5 hires, and my whole focus was how do we get to market? Once we're at market, how do we create more revenue streams? And then how do we raise our round from venture capitalists? That way we can kind of do the whole thing again for the next round. So I actually did that 4 times. I did that for 4 different startups. They were all in tech,
Uh,
but different sectors. So I did fintech in the agricultural sector in India. I did marketplaces and consumer goods in the US. I did what's it called, fashion tech and supply chain, also in the US. And then I did a little bit of ed tech. So ed tech, serving underserved communities, going to higher education. Little did I know that like a lot of it was kind of like this impact theme that eventually would become a theme later on that we're kind of like seeing right now. But for me, I was just chasing that like where does innovation meet where it's really most needed at most aspects of time. Um, and it was actually the company that was launched in Mumbai in India because we had started in Houston, Texas. But we raised our Series A and everything. It was all good, and we're like, let's move to Mumbai. And that's where I was like, I don't think I'm ready to move. So I took the pause. I kind of like stayed here in Texas, and
well,
that's when I made the switch to the investment side. Right? They were like, speak to our first investor, an angel, and it seems like you've had quite a bit of a unique experiences of like seeing a lot of aspects of the market and kind of like the operation perspective. So that was the first fund. I worked for Research Valley Funds. I was an analyst for them, and they also had a very interesting structure. So they invested in early stage companies, but they also had like a lot of just not high performing companies. And so I had a lot of time to advise those companies or speak
uh,
with those companies and kind of like address like why are you stagnant or why is there no more sales or why can we not make more partnerships? Like what happened? Long story short. So that was when I officially switched to venture capital. I just kind of wanted to find a little bit more because it was just kind of general. It was agnostic and it was an angel syndicate. So same way that I worked my way on the entrepreneur side, I had to find it on the investor side. Did tech. cloud, right? And then I think until the pandemic hit in 2020, when I was like, I had a little bit more time to focus on myself. So I actually started doing a lot more volunteering, and that's how I found the Shapers organization. And I use a lot of their like impact work with them. I did one of their projects with them, like Shaping Impact Capital or something, Shaper Impact Capital. That was one of their projects where they were trying to help startup founders who were trying to raise money. And I use that experience to then apply to funds and be like, I'm not just a tech venture capitalist. Like I've actually been having this background of working with startups, and now I have this very, very direct background of working with impact startups and impact funds. So that's what eventually allowed me to pivot to social wealth partners, where we invest in early stage companies. Used to be agnostic, but the focus is going to be a lot more into health and climate in the next couple of years. And then we also have kind of like a tandem team where the team is an advisory team, and they'll work with a lot of the people that give a really great network effect. So universities, government agencies, other local communities that'll help the founders that we have in the portfolio company land better in the good market or expand and scale better whenever that time comes for them. So on that same side, right, like whenever I do a lot of the due diligence and meet with a lot of founders, I'll actually be a team player because I've done it before on other teams for a lot of portfolios that come in. So maybe I'll be a director of sales if they don't have a sales team and I need to build one up for them. I'll be a chief impact officer if I need to focus on relationships and partnerships that are going to help that impact, help us scale, and
It's like helping them out,
putting on the
yeah, in
uniform,
a
putting on
very
the uniform
layman
that the team
terms.
is wearing. Um, so
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
and that's led me to the space that I am now. I'm obviously a lot more on the investment side, but it doesn't mean that I don't like to be on the entrepreneurial side a lot as well.
Awesome, awesome. That's actually a really cool story. Yeah, so deep down into our subject, getting started. So I had the amazing questions. Climate-related investments often involve long-term considerations and may face unique challenges. So how do you navigate these challenges and manage risk in your investment portfolio? And to add on to that, can you discuss any challenges or barriers that you have encountered when trying to fund climate-related startups? And how going about addressing these challenges and supporting the
Yeah.
growth of these companies?
Yeah. It's a loaded question. And honestly, we could have like a whole podcast on just the one question. So,
It's a
so
big question, I know.
if I could like
Yeah,
summarize
but
it,
I just
right?
wanted to.
I think one of the biggest issues right now in the climate investment space is like answering that question: what is defined as the climate investment space? How close do I need to get to the issue and still call myself a climate founder, or even on the same side, a climate investor, right? Like if I build a platform that tells companies that they're doing bad and they should do something about it, I'm not directly going to contribute to it, but I'm a support to that climate issue, right? Then there's companies that are a lot more specific that are like harvesting phytoplankton, or like focusing on these ions of these like specific chemical bonds in what's it called, like soil and stuff. That's really interesting that they found that if they plant it somewhere, it'll suction
Wow.
off the carbon in very designated areas, right? Or green concrete, where we're learning how to design, so it's a different take. Do you want to reduce the waste that's being already produced, but that means that there's still going to be waste? Do you want to be the one that just completely removes the waste from the space? You want to be the people that kind of lets people know what they should be doing, right? And I think all those arguments are very important to define, because it could very easily be like you sit on the outside, or you sit a bit more further outside, and someone's like, oh, you're not investing in climate like me, or you're not working in climate like me, right? So I think first of all, like that issue, without me having to answer that, like that question alone is, I think, one of the very difficult barriers. What are we talking about when it comes to climate investing? And then like the other part of it is like, I think there's two parts of it. The second part, I think it's always going to be the same no matter what industry we're talking about. What does an investor actually know about the space to be able to invest in it? And then they can say, yes, I know that for every dollar I put in, I am removing half a pound of carbon, right? Like, do they know the exact logistics of where their dollar goes to, and does it transfer? Or can they also, like founders, just kind of be like, well, because like I've seen this in the health sector, right? Like some people say that they help the health sector because they're focusing on cells that are like stem cells that are going to be able to produce and create hearts for humans. That way they can do transplants and easily, produce that. And there's other people that like just manage the software for the payment transaction part of hospitals. And both of them are like, I'm helping healthcare system, but they're both producing
Wow.
very different results, right? So it's just like as an investor at the same time, are you going to have just a portfolio that has a theme and be like, I'm making an impact as an investor? Or are you gonna like really be specific about the ones you choose, right? And do you know that what they're doing, the technology they're putting out, the product that they're putting out, is actually producing the service that they're claiming, or is it just producing a good revenue return? And you're happy with that because the LPs are happy with that, and they give you a next round for your next fund, right? And then I think the ultimate last question is going to be like, if we really get down to the nitty gritty, and I think this is kind of where we really need to count a lot more on the technical people. Like this one's starting to get a little bit out of in my opinion, like outside of my expertise, is which of these areas that I brought up on the first question, like what part of it of the team do you want to play? Which part of those is the most important right now at this time? Which one moves the needle the most? If I only have like, let's just simplify it, $10 and there's like 10 buckets to put it, which of these buckets is honestly going to be the most effective that we can see in the quickest sense and is the easiest for people to do, right? Because like, for example, like one of the biggest things that I think is that there's some technologies, like I've met some that like are doing wind harvest. There's some technologies that are creating like the food or a lot of this like hard material like green steel, green concrete. But the investors don't know a lot, so they're going to wait until they can see the same metrics that they can for other startups, like for software and stuff. I'm not going to invest until like I know you're good and you guys are making this many sales, right? Because until then, it's a huge risk and I don't know. But the issue, like this is where it clashes, and this is where I kind of invite the question: is venture capital the best for a lot of these hard technical, hard science, hard industries, frontier tech that we're looking at? Because a lot of these technologies need a massive amount of capital expenditure at the very beginning. And a lot of the times that capital expenditure is the same size as like a seed or series A round, depending on your region, right? But we're talking about like a good one to, I think,
Wow.
I think the biggest I've heard just to get the product launched was like probably 10 million. And that was their seed, right? Because they categorized it by like my MVP, like I have an MVP is by the end of seed. They were like, this is technically my seed round then because I don't even have the MVP. I'm still building it, right? And at that point, it doesn't fit the venture capital model because like
Wow.
people want to invest, like 3 million and get the valuation of like 9 million and like 5 to 7 years schedule, like I should be able to get like the money out and give back to the LPs. But when you have these conversations, like, or a lot of like the health ones, like the cancers and stuff, like they have to build this thing first. It's going to take a year or two, and that's where all the capital is going. Then there's the business aspect of it, like what I like to call the actual business aspect of it, selling it to people, finding those partnerships, building a substantial revenue and business model so you can expand and scale. Until then, all we're doing is still just building a product. And so it's just in a very financial sense, long-term sense, temperance of how much can you last with your investment, asset class even, that's not the best match. It really isn't. And there are a couple of funds that are like, I'd like to commend because they understand what's going on. And they're like, a lot of these companies need a lot of support at the very beginning because they can't build it. They need the money. But we also can't come in this early because, our LPs also can't afford or tolerate that wait. So there has to be some sort of space, some sort of limbo where both of these actors can exist, interact with each other, still build, and then pass the baton to each other gently whenever it's appropriate so they can get finally back to the demand, back to the market, right? Because there's been a lot of things, and I've had these conversations, like, right, there's been a lot of technologies or materials that have already existed, but we haven't found a way to make it commercial where a lot of people can use. Solar panels existed for so
Totally.
long, and I don't think it was until like someone made that material a commodity because they overmined it, because I think we started using it for smartphones, that then they made it cheap. There was so much of it that they were like, okay, now we can build a lot of it, right? Like, so
True,
it's
true.
examples like that where the market has to. And so some of the funds I think are like breakthrough ventures from Bill Gates and stuff. So what they do is that they work with like universities, and like this is how I got into like a lot of the venture space, like with research valley funds. They work with the universities and they're like, all right, let's look at the innovative research that's coming out, the innovative products, the innovative inventions that are coming out, and support them as they grow, provide them the right resources to finish building out the product. So let's get them that grant instead of getting them VC dollars. And let's make it easy for them. Let's not make them compete against all the other graduate students and all the other people for the rest of the grant money. Like, no, this is going to be for entrepreneurial commercialization because we're trying to build something with this immediately. And then there's like the next step of like, let's accelerate it. Let's kind of build up the team because whoever built this product might just have a technical background, might just have an engineering background, might be a PhD in something else. Let's get them the team that they trust with people that are going to be like, I'll be your salesperson, I'll be your CTO, I'll be your CEO, right? And then when it's finally at that stage, it's like, hey, now it's a company I can invest in. You have a product, you're not making revenue, but now you have like real commercial or, like, you have these real commercial clients. This is now, for all intents and purposes, a startup I can invest in. And the truth is, like, that structure isn't natural in the venture capital space, but there are funds that are trying to build it, or there are people that have tried to do like a lot of stuff. Like, let me invest in a lot of stuff with a little bit of micro, and then if I do see it successfully, I'll invest a lot, or they'll work with accelerators. So it's a huge question or conundrum in the VC space, but I think it's one worth looking into and not giving up because like this technology needs to happen. And VC also needs to innovate and update because if we want to get into this space, which this is like the big space where there's going to be a lot of ROI in it, then we need to learn how to best get in it. If not, you're just going to get a lot of like software climate based deals. And that space is honestly getting very, very saturated quickly. So anyone who's an investor or an organization that's looking to help that sort of like mitigation space. And a lot of people don't even talk about this in climate. They talk about this in a lot of like just hard tech stuff. It's like the death valley of like what founders need to make it over, right? Like that chicken and the egg. Like I need the money to build this, but I'm not going to get the money unless I have something built because then, I'm just kind of stuck. So unless you have that network, that bootstrapping, it's going to be difficult.
Sure, sure. Awesome. And I'm also pretty interested in that particular aspect that you talked about, external stakeholder confidence when you told about, essentially the investor not knowing whether, the 100% of the fund is exactly going towards this, is this the accurate impact? And I think it is very important, I could actually see that happening right now in India. There is a lot of discussions going around that because we have a new social stock exchange and we have this, whole
Right.
new set of social auditing standards that are coming out wherein there is a revised framework to impact and evaluate the impact assessment. And I think that is also kind of pretty important, when you're talking about investments in
Yeah.
climate as well.
Yeah, that's
How
100%
uniform it
correct.
is, how
Yeah,
accurate
like
it is.
we need to really look at what we're doing, right? Like there's no sense in boiling the ocean. There's no sense in like being busy just to say we're busy. Like we have to be very strategic about this if we want the results that we want. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah, you talked about a lot of cool stuff, ions in the soil. Can you discuss some of the emerging trends or
Mhm.
technologies in the climate space that you find particularly exciting? This you seem to
Well, yeah,
have
because like I mean
interacted with a lot of these
when
folks.
when I've looked at this like the agnostic space, I've gotten a good chunk of everything, and I did try to have like I don't have the traditional venture capital background like investment banking or consultancy and then just straight up venture capital. Like I feel like I took a couple of laps around with researchers and stuff and that had a more technical background. But I mean, it's always got to come back like it's a relation. Like I guess like what's happening right now, right? And the emerging trends that we see is like this impact, this climate, this health, and a lot of deep tech, right? Like there's a lot of bits into deep tech, Web3, AI, what is considered deep tech, what isn't. Those are the big things that I see right now that are happening. But I think the important thing to really focus is like how do they apply, right? Because like a lot of deep tech when it kind of came out, it was just like this is coming out and let's just kind of invest in it. But I think what's important is like how is the deep tech working, right? Like what are we using it for? Um, and I think sometimes, you know, it's not surprising to say, or it's not even surprising to see that sometimes like there are trends that people just kind of follow and they're like, I guess that's where most of the money's going. So let's put the money. And I know a lot of founders have felt the same way too, when it's just like let me work on this one thing, but maybe an industry will get hot, or maybe a sector, or maybe a technology will get really hot. And if you don't have all that combination, it's like you get ignored at the parties, or you get ignored at all the places, right? Like you might be a climate person.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like, and I get it
It's
now, and I
it's like going
understand
behind the
why. Like
herd,
a lot of
you know.
founders are like, "Yep, this is my startup. I am an AI, ML, blockchain, like crypto tech, climate venture." And by the end of it, it's like, okay, what do you do? Like I don't know what, because all we're listing out is just like qualifying words. We're not talking about the real stuff of it. So there are
Wow.
trends that kind of happen that I feel that, like, sometimes it's not a choice. My choice, like, like unless I was like a super angel, I don't always have 100% choice. Sometimes it's like, hey, um, they say that this market is, yeah,
So that's actually pretty funny. That's actually what you what you said. It's like it's
yeah,
how you
yeah,
evaluate the
yeah.
person's
And because like
attractiveness.
sometimes it's just
How
like, I
many
don't know, like
jargons they
they
use.
tell me it's like, hey, right now like AI is really hot. Meet with this AI founder, and I look at it and stuff, and it's just like, I mean, I feel like it's not going to be your thesis because like I know we got to look at AI because it's hot right now, but that's just what's going to get in the door. What's going to get the investment is like if it checks off everything else. And this is like when you've done this so many times, you can kind of tell, it's like, I feel like they're not going to have the rest of the stuff. But you're like, okay, I guess I have to meet with this founder, or I have to go to this conference, or I have to go to this event, even though I'm not even sure that like the quality or like the match that I want is there, but because they're a trend, right? So for me, I don't know, like it's kind of hard for me to say I get excited with trends. Um, because I don't. I'm really skeptical of trends, right? So, and it's like, yeah, I will say like that's me. Like I'm really skeptical of trend unless
Oh.
like, and like I don't want to be super biased either, but it's just like, let's say your trend is really hot right now, like deep tech, AI, and climate. If you're a founder and you tell me, hi, I'm an exciting startup, I use AI technology, we're a deep tech company, and we're helping the climate, I'm really skeptical right now. But if you immediately get to the value of what you do, it's like, hi, in the climate space, what we do is that we're really focused on cleaning the water for local communities, and we make sure that there's verification on each one of these jobs, and no one's like pocketing any money or no one's stealing any money because we make the transactions report on the blockchain, and you can't, they're non-fungible. It's like, okay, that makes sense. Like you're using that technology to support it, but the real model is that you're cleaning water and you're providing, that's the real value add. You're providing a good cleaning water and a good ecosystem, and you're just using that technology to support it, right? So I understand it. Your immediate pitch was value, and I'm excited to hear about it. So yeah, like
Totally.
sorry, and I'm sorry if I kind of changed the question, but it's just like, if I'm excited, for me, I'm always more excited not about the trend, but like I guess it's like, okay, what can you do with the trend? If blockchain is really exciting right now, what are you doing with blockchain? Because like when crypto was huge, like I heard a lot of people building a coin, and I was like, Austin, what does this coin use? Because there were some people that were creating very interesting coins. They're using coins for like destable economies. They were using coins for a lot of refugees that didn't have a way to transact money legally and safely, right? And I'm like, that's important. Um, but then there's coins that are like, oh, I build a coin and I have a community, and once you buy enough coins, you can build your own coin on my own coin community. I'm like, okay, that what are we doing here? We're just okay, like I'm not excited about it. It just sounds like you are
Wow.
on the trend to build another trend. And I'm like, again, that goes in the door really well. But if we're trying to, if you, and as a founder, I'm sure you're interested not just getting into the door, but making sure that you get the capital sign and you walk out the back door the right way. It's like I need to see how that trend is being applied, and going back to like why, what makes me excited when I first started this, like where's the innovation and who's asking for it, right? Because that's the question I'm going to ask. Like, okay, you know what? Cool, coins. I'm not going to act like I know it because I already said at the very beginning, a lot of industries, the investor doesn't know. So I'm like, what do you do with it? Right. And that's always going to be my question. Like, who's demanding for this? Right. And what's the value that we're extracting from this? Because that's important. And that's what's going to get me excited.
I think that's a very, very, very important point that you just made, about how we are using the
Yeah,
technology, whether there's a product market fit, whether you're actually able
yeah,
to monetize it. Those are also like pretty
100%.
important questions that actually fall into this domain. And coming to this
Yeah.
shaping impact investment project that you're doing with Wonsik.
And Dejan, yeah,
So
the
to the
Dejan
listeners,
Hub.
Wonsik is the curator
Yeah, I mean,
from
there's a
South
couple
Korea.
partners, a couple of shout
He's
outs, right? So
also a
there's
fellow
Wantik,
investor. Yep.
there's also Lisa, and there's also Mario and Felipe and Alejandro. So they're all curators. We all met at Geneva. I was lucky enough to go this year and last year, so that's why there's a couple of them on the team. Yeah, we met too. So there's a couple that
We
have
met.
joined. In
Yep.
short, what shaping impact investment is that we all realize that we're in the same space. We're all venture capitalists and we're all shapers. So we all have something immediately to talk about. Because, like while we did have some good days there, like some people still had to work. So it's like, oh man, like we would kind of take like a little corner and then we would notice just like, hey, is that like a deal? And it's like, oh yeah. And then, we kind of find out and stuff. And then,
It's funny,
yeah,
just when I'm reminiscing of those days,
there's a lot
there's a
of,
lot of consultants, a lot of
it's a very,
consultants, a
very
lot of people from
rich network.
VC
It really is.
in Global Shapers
And in a short
community as
amount of
well.
time, like you are focused on like the global missions, the projects, but on a downtime. And it was kind of funny because you'd walk around and someone's like, you're also an entrepreneur who's building this. I am too, but I'm on a different part of like the world. So we're not competitors. I want to get your take on what has this been like, right? So it was kind of cool to see that. So no different for us. We had the same thing for the venture capitalists, the shapers. And like it's a pretty custom thing in venture capital. It's like, hey, if I have a deal, it doesn't work for me, let me just share it. Especially if I hear that like it works for you. Like I've had companies that are like, oh, you do climate early stage. I was like, yeah, that's okay. And then like for them, early stage is different. So they're like Series B, and I'm like, oh, that's honestly the checks are too big for our fund. But I do know like a friend of mine, he does later stage climate. Let me make an introduction to you. So when we all met, we were like, let's just do that at least, bare minimum. Because we already do that with our work, let's do it with people that we actually like and we've met. So it started out pretty simple. And then I was just like, we should probably formalize this a little bit more. I've been on a couple of the teams that have done something like this. They've done newsletters. But I think the issue is that people want to always, you know, and I don't always, and I don't want to be hypocritical, right? Like I always want to do what I'm saying or what I'm asking of people. I feel like people build something and they get excited with the thing they build and they just let it just boom. And it's good to grow. But for me, I always wanted to keep it on the value add. And I was like, the reason why this worked is because we all know each other really well. We all have the same value, we all have the same background, and we all talk to each other pretty well. And that's like if we scale this and we just invite a bunch of people and we just say like, okay, oh yeah, you want to do it, then we're going to get a lot of people that aren't going to respond to us. So the main model is like, let's make introductions from impact. Climate right now was the first focus. Impact founders to impact investors, because we're impact investors. Like, hey, if I don't have any, let me introduce them to you. I'm only going to introduce you one that I think you should invest in. If it's not, I'm not going to send it to you. I'm not an accelerator. I'm not a newsletter. The founders and paying me. I'm only doing this to honestly make you look good and give you value. And that was the main thesis of what this project was, you know. And like we've had a lot of founders be like, oh, like, can you help me? And it's like, we'll be honest, like, hey, honestly, like, yeah, we'll keep your records, we'll do the due diligence, but right now we don't have a friend of ours that's investing in this space. And like, oh, can you at least like still introduce us? And maybe it's like, no, no, because I know that they don't want to, and we're trying to keep it with integrity, right? So that's what we did as a main model, and we thought it'd be a lot more powerful. We align with everyone, so we have a North America team, a Latin America team, a Europe team, and an Asian team. And my shout out right now is like, if you're hearing about this and you're also interested in this and you're in Africa, we definitely need a team there. Also India. I know that's like Asia, but I feel like it's just like its own ecosystem. It's just so massive that it needs like its own team, honestly. So shout out to people who are listening. If you're in that space, like I invite you to jump onto the project, because I mean, the more bases that we cover, the more impact that we're doing, right? And we're trying to keep this an honest space. Um, and so, I mean, like going back to, I think one of the first questions that you asked, it's like, how do we address this issue that we have in impact or climate? Because a lot of these technologies are hard tech too, our health, our climate, and they face a lot of the same issues. It needs a lot of front heavy capital, or you need the network, or you need those introductions. So we thought that we could resolve a lot of that, and we can resolve some of them. Like we decided to be that person's network. If we really like someone, I'm their friend. I'm like, you have the rest of my team because we're aligned on thesis, we're aligned on morals and what we want to do and what we want to achieve, and we're in the same part. So we'll do that, and we'll support teams. And it does, because we've had some that are just
And
like
that becomes
some
very
people
powerful,
that,
right?
they don't have a
Especially, those
background,
connections
or this is their
actually,
first time raising,
it
and they
multiplies.
think they have everything, but it's just like, you know what, we're spending too much money on fundraising. And from my perspective and the rest of like these other investors, because right, every investor is different, they all have their different, like, I guess, like, okay, I'll invest in you now, right? They're different metrics. But if there's something glaring and it's just like, honestly, unless someone believes in you, like, it just doesn't fit the model. And you need to address these things before you keep asking for money, before you hire another advisor, another consultant to help you raise. Because honestly, it's just not ready to raise. It's not your pitch. It's not the way you're doing stuff. Like, you just need to fundamentally fix some stuff. So we've had those conversations. And then from it, we've been trying to build a community. So we've added a couple more things to it, right? We've added like podcasts similar like yours, but for one, for like a founder series and one on an investor series. And we invite these people to just be very transparent. And I mean, we have some structure to it. And the point is that these founders and investors get to talk a little bit more about maybe what they feel that they don't get to talk about. Because a lot of founders, I feel like they're getting interviewed, but they don't get to talk about the exciting parts of their startup. And honestly, just like in real life, you might not get a job not because you're not qualified, and even maybe because you're not even bad at interviewing, but honestly, you might just get unlucky that day, and the person that is interviewing you is just bad at interviewing you. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Everyone can be bad at their job. There's been plenty of venture capitalists that I met, like, they just don't have that acumen, they don't have the background, um, and they just don't last. But it doesn't mean that they're still not going to have a conversation with a couple of founders for the first year or two before they realize it. And why is it that founder's fault, right? And they might ask horrible questions. They might not ask the questions that highlights what good of an investment opportunity this deal is. So we kind of like, hey, if you haven't had the chance, if you met the wrong investors, you haven't really been able to speak, like, this is what we do. And I actually put that in my survey too. Whenever I'm doing due diligence, I ask like some questions like before I'm on a call with founders, and on the bottom I'm like, is there anything that you think is like worth mentioning that I just didn't ask because like I got blindsided? And you'd be surprised what people kind of put down there. It's like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Like you should have listed that in this part because it's really important. So we just give founders a couple of like, a platform for them to speak. And it's not just for investment. It's not just being like, hey, I'm looking for investors. They have a chance to ask for partners because we've had a couple that are like, I'm not looking for a capital raise. What I'm looking is to expand in here, and I'm looking for any partners in the space. For investors, I think some of the more exciting part that we've had is that we've allowed investors to be transparent and be like, maybe founders aren't getting it, or maybe founders think I'm kind of like maybe not being honest with what I say, because like I know a lot of founders get frustrated. Like I've been on those team calls where it's just like, I feel like that investor is wasting my time. He says that he did invest in this. His website said this, but when I got on the call, like it just didn't feel like it, or they never invested. And yeah, like I said, sometimes there are bad investors, but other times it's just a misunderstanding and not understanding the real context of it. So there have been investors, and we've had a lot of these kind of questions too, where it's just like, where like that kind of question was asked about like what are some good trends in climate and what aren't. And we had it, and it was kind of like very chaotic but interesting. I think it's the one that you first attended, because we were all different climate investors. Mine was focused on like a lot more of the green tech. I think someone was focused on food, and someone was focused like on energy. But we all agreed on one thing, where it's just like, hey, like, we're not going to do like secondhand apparel or something.
Yep.
And there was actually quite a couple of founders that were like in the clothing and fashion, and like, and they really defined themselves as climate. And like, that was just kind of like very disturbing. Like, what do you mean? Like, right. And everyone has their reasons why. And I think what's important to note is that I think at least when I say it, right, I can speak about what I'm saying. When I tell someone that like, that's not it or something, I try to be like very descriptive. What I'm saying isn't a one all be all. Like, you can get off this call, get on another call, and raise your 2 million on the next call after I told you no. I'm just saying no because I know that like the temperance of my investors, and this just won't work for them. I'm not saying you aren't helping the climate space. I'm not saying your technology isn't important. I'm not saying that I personally wouldn't invest in this. It just doesn't fit my exact thesis. And I think even though it's so small and may seem kind of stupid that I'm talking about this, it's such a simple concept that it's the same as product market fit. It's the same as qualifying. It's the same as doing your due diligence that you should realize. And I encourage founders to kind of be a little bit more forward with their questions and being like, do you really invest in what I'm looking for? Or what do you mean when you invest in climate? Or what do you mean you invest in successful climate companies? What does success mean to you, right? And you have to be a little bit more descriptive of what it is and having those hard conversations. So we allow investors to be like, when I say I invest in climate, I mean this and this and this technology. If it's anything outside of this, that's why I haven't answered your email, because I'm not going to waste your time. And I know my guys are going to say no, like, and I'm sorry if I just didn't give you a formal letter because there's so many emails, but that's why, right? You wouldn't get the investment either way. So I think it just kind of gives good clarity for both people to kind of like express, because I don't think anyone is right or wrong. I think a lot of the issues that we have, um, as people, it's just communication. We don't really understand. We're just trying to get to what we want to, and we're just trying to like negotiate everything. I'm build something, I'm trying to work with you. I just don't know if you can also work on the same thing, right? That's all what these people are doing. And I think if people just work on the communication and are very clear, and if they don't understand, ask questions about it. Like, hey, sorry, man, I'm not a VC. I don't know what you mean by like PMFP or something like that. I haven't heard that word. That's the first time I've heard it. Like, what do you mean by that? You want good PFFP? Like, okay, like what does that need to look like? And I could tell you if I have that or not, because I honestly don't know what you're talking about. We're speaking a different language, but it doesn't mean that this isn't something that you don't want to buy. And I'm not going to let that opportunity escape just because we don't understand our language right now. Like, that's a silly thing to not let a good opportunity happen for. So that's why I think that the podcasts are great. And then, sorry, just one more thing to go back to that first question. Is like, how do we help those climates that need a lot of heavy X? We've added a new focus where we're not only just introducing funds to investors, now we're actually also trying to raise funds as well. So we're doing the LP to fund manager introduction as well. But since we're just starting off, we're not doing like a lot of them, like the funds. Like we have a couple of funds already, like to invest in startups. But on the LP side, like we're doing it on a very like one by one individual basis. So right now we're working with Freezon Capital, and they are a venture capital focused on deep tech, um, climate tech, health tech, all in LATAM. And they're following that model that I said, right? Like it's difficult to invest in these early stage companies because CapEx or something. It's pretty similar to the one I mentioned in Breakthrough. So Freezon Capital, yeah. So Frisson Capital has been working with a university system in Vancouver in Canada to incubate, commercialize,
It's like a long
productize, and
gestation
build a
period,
lot of
right?
the research
It takes
stuff,
a long
or like a
gestation
lot of
period.
the
So
technology and a lot of the innovations that's happening at the university level that we know is there, but it's kind of hard to harness. Then they later connect it to a market, an application, and an accelerator in Chile. And once you build it and once you incubate it and you have like a company, then they take that product, they take that team, and they try to like have that product market fit with a couple of just communities there, and they with the network support of the accelerator. And if that works, the top candidates from there, then they grab them and they invest in them, freeze on capital. And then that's where like the VC finally gets to come in, because it's at the stage that it makes sense for the venture capital. Now, when they invest, at this point, like that startup has already had its 5 years, maybe 2 years at the accelerator, 2, 3 years at the incubator in Vancouver. And like, right, that's like the 5, 6 years that these startups need. When I said, hey, like, let me invest the 10 million to that generator, what's going to happen? Oh, we'll finish building the generator in 2 years. And then after that, then we'll start, right? They've already done that in Vancouver. They've already done that in Chile. And now whenever they come to the US or North America, or they expand to
totally.
Europe, Freezon Capital gives them that early stage investment. Finally, it makes sense. They trust these teams, even if they don't have everything, like 1 million ARR, 5 partnerships with incumbent members, like because they have seen the team perform, hit the mark steadily for a couple of years from inception to product to finally scaling. And so that's why I like that group. That's why we chose and selected them. And we're like, all right, like we can address the other stuff, like the advising, the network, but this seems to be an issue that very few funds are addressing. Some accelerators are trying. Breakthrough Ventures, like I mentioned, I think is doing very well. And I was like, and it seems like Freezon is trying to do something similar using their network, using their teams and using their expertises. They're using like PhDs from MIT and Harvard to really support the system. So I'm like, let's help them out. They fit our profile. they fit our temperament, they fit the people, and we met the team. And so the Latin America team for Shaping Impact Investment is heading that, and we're raising funds for their fund. Hopefully, will be done by this year or Q1 of next year, and we'll start making investments in the next summer into those companies that we talked about, into climate tech, into deep tech specifically their application into climate tech, not just building deep tech to build deep tech. So that's going to be very exciting. That's what we're focused on. Yeah, that's where my head's at right now, at least.
So, David, to conclude the conversation, finally, in your opinion, what's one
Yeah.
pertinent way in which an ordinary person can contribute to climate action and promote sustainability?
uh, let's see, what was it saying? Yeah. I mean, I would classify myself an ordinary person, right? And I don't think
No,
I set
you're
out to
not
do.
ordinary. I mean, you don't fall into that category.
I see myself as just a normal human being. I'll say that at least. And when I set out to do this, I didn't set out to be like I'm going to become a venture capitalist and focus and then go to Geneva and talk about climate. That never really happened to me. Honestly, man, I was really surprised when I was there, but it doesn't mean I didn't appreciate it. I just kind of really focused on that innovation and demand, and it drove me here. So I don't know. Like I think the important thing that I want to like for sure make sure everyone understands is that this climate issue is really massive, right? And I I'm of the opinion that we shouldn't be alarmist, that we shouldn't be alarming with people and maybe realize that like it's kind of difficult because I feel like there's a lot of consequences to the words that you say, right? Like without making it sound and within context, a lot of what you do individually isn't going to affect in the big scale of what you do on a day-to-day basis. I think what you do intentionally with purpose will. So if you're worried about like, hey, like I'm contributing hugely because of the straws that they banned in certain parts of the US, or I don't recycle as well, or I forgot that one milk carton in the trash instead of putting it in the blue bin with the recycle, right? Like I wouldn't I wouldn't go crazy about that because at the end of the day, like that's not really what's causing a majority of the waste, the pollution. It really isn't. It really isn't. The real contributor to what's really affecting climate change. And that's why I went back to that question and I said, you know what we're really gonna need to depend on is like those hard technical people, those researchers that really understand and can really pinpoint or even entrepreneurs who can really pinpoint where is that pain coming from? Where is this waste coming from? Why is it and attack that because that's where a lot of it is really occurring. We need because like right, I'm kind of blind. I can only do analysis to analyze what is going to be the best way, most efficient way for money to be spent, but I don't know where, right? I still need someone to kind of point, and that's where we need to work together with someone. So that's what's really causing it. It's like the fact that big companies use so much plastic to wrap some materials. It's the fact that some companies have to ship one item all the way to one part of the country, ship it back, ship it right back because they didn't paint it, and then ship it back and then sell it. That's way more than your trip that you drive for an hour. That's way more than your flight when you go visit family to another city, right? Don't be like, man. So what I would say is like, obviously do your part. If there is already an infrastructure for you to do your part, please do it. If there's already a recycling bin, if there's already something, just do it. Just do it. And I would say if you do that bare minimum, then I think you're doing all right. I think you count yourself as an ally for someone who's helping not contribute to the waste of climate change, and you're already doing your best. And if you do happen to have a little bit of extra time, then get involved with your local organizations that I would say are focused on cleaning up local areas. I think that's probably the most effective on an individual level. Clean up your local areas, clean up your local parks, your local, because a lot of local fauna and animals really need that. I think that would be really impactful if people did that. And then maybe get educated on stuff that you really can purchase or you really can affect, like but you gotta understand that the real responsibility belongs to the corporation. So if you do find out that a corporation irresponsibly is destroying clothing like Zara right now, then like, try to find an alternative if you can afford it, right? Because then there's like economic barriers too, where some people like, hey, I'm not in a position where but if you're in the position of privilege, then do that. If you have money to invest and you want to be self-conscious, then do the due diligence of researching of who actually is wasteful and who isn't, right? If you don't have money to invest, then don't worry about it, right? So one thing's one, like don't be an alarming, don't feel like you're causing the burning of this climate. There's a lot more other people responsible. You can get involved, do it, and volunteer with organizations. If you're just trying to see an immediate effect and an immediate impact, I promise you, cleaning your local areas is probably the best thing you can do. And then if there's already an infrastructure set for you to do stuff, like just follow it, man. Don't throw trash in the street, just and if you just live like a
Yeah.
good, sustainable person, you're doing it, right? You're doing it. I promise you are. So yeah, just it's a short life, man. The earth will be here long after we're all gone. Just make sure, if you're going to be an impact, make sure you're doing a positive impact, and then don't stress out and just have a good time. We're all just here just trying to be friends, man. Yeah, that's it. We're just trying to have a good time. Yeah.
That's actually a pretty good answer. Yeah, and I like how you give the 3 pointers. Point number
Yeah.
one, you have to do this. Point number two, you have to
Yeah.
do this. That's actually a pretty interesting answer. Thank you so
No,
much,
I
David, for
appreciate
spending your time with
I
us and
appreciate
giving
I
your
appreciate you,
insights
man. I'm really glad we
into
met in
this particular
Geneva.
issue.
This was really awesome. I think you're right because I think you suggested if we did this in Geneva, this would have been like even cooler. I wish you can maybe in one of our next Shaper events we'll meet in person, or maybe we can do another one of these later. This was really really fun. I think it's really cool.
Awesome, awesome. And also, I, extend all the very best wishes for your Shaping Impact investment project, as well as for all your personal endeavors
Thank you very
at
much.
the
I really
Dallas Hub.
appreciate it, and likewise. I mean, best wishes to all of us. Best wishes to everyone. And yeah, just go live your life and do what you want. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye bye.